Jesus said, "Follow me and I'll make you fishers of men." I hope you told somebody about Jesus this week, either with your words or your actions. And I hope you're on time reading your Bible through. We were in Leviticus and Matthew this past week. And in those readings, you would have come across the answers to these trivia questions. The first one, how many men did how many men did Moses send to spy out the land of Canaan? Yes, it was 12, right. And then of those 12 spies that were sent into the land, they brought back their reports. How many of them encouraged the people to go on and take possession of the land? Yes, exactly. They were 2. Now, can you name them? And all of their family members. Just kidding. It was Joshua and Caleb. Those were the 2. In the New Testament, we covered this one recently in class. Who was the first human that the risen Jesus revealed himself to? That was Mary Magdalene, exactly. Well, we're continuing our study in the focusing on the characters around the cross and the final weeks of Jesus' ministry. We looked at first Joseph, then Thomas, Peter. Last week was Mary Magdalene, and now this week we're going to do Lazarus. Next week we will tackle Pilate. This week on the study of Lazarus, there are so many lessons that we could learn from this story that we'll just have to select 1 or 2 to try to learn from this text. It's basically the full chapter of chapter 11 of the book of John. So if you want to turn there, we're going to get started in our study of the lessons, or some lessons, that we can learn from the life of and death and resurrection of this man called Lazarus. In verse 1, it says, "Now a certain man was sick, Lazarus of Bethany, the town of Mary and her sister Martha. It was that Mary who anointed the Lord with fragrant oil and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was sick." And then the sisters, therefore the sisters sent to Jesus, saying, "Lord, behold, he whom you love is sick." When Jesus heard that, he then delayed. And then dropping down to verse 3, now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. Now we're going to move on to verse 17. "So when Jesus came, he found that he had already been in the tomb. Lazarus has died. Now Bethany was near Jerusalem, about 2 miles away, and many of the Jews had joined the women around Martha and Mary to comfort them. Now Martha, as soon as she heard that Jesus was coming, went and met him, but Mary was sitting in the house. Now Martha said to Jesus, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now, I know that whatever you ask of God, God will give you." Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise again." And Martha said to him, I know that he'll rise again in the resurrection at the last day. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me, though he may die, he shall live. And whoever lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this? She said to him, Yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who has come into this world. Verse 28. And when she had said these things, she went her way and secretly called Mary, her sister, saying, The teacher has come and is calling for you. As soon as she heard that, she rose quickly and came to him. Now Jesus was not yet come into the town, but was in the place where Martha met him. Then the Jews who were there with her in the house and comforting her, when they saw that Mary rose quickly and went out, followed her, saying, She's going to the tomb to weep there. Then when Mary came to where Jesus was, she saw him. She fell down at his feet, saying to him, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Therefore, when Jesus saw her weeping, and the tears, and the Jews who came with her weeping, he groaned in his spirit and was troubled. And he said, Where have you laid him? And they said to him, Lord, come and see. Jesus wept. Then the Jews said, See how he loved him. And some of them said, Could not this man have opened the eyes of the blind, also have kept this man from dying? So let's drop on down to verse 39. Jesus said, Take away the stone. Martha, the sister of him who was dead, said to him, Lord, by this time there is a stench, for he's been dead 4 days. And Jesus said to her, Did I not say to you that if you would believe, you would see the glory of God? Then they took away the stone from the place where the dead man was lying. And Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me, and I know that you always hear me, but because of the people who are standing by, I said this, that they may believe that you sent me. Now when he had said these things, he cried with a loud voice, Lazarus, come forth. And he who had died came out, bound hand and foot with grave clothes, and his face was wrapped with a cloth. Jesus said to them, Loose him and let him go. Verse 1, going back to that, a certain man was sick, and his name was Lazarus of Bethany. The first thing I want you to notice is that Mary and Martha sent a message to Jesus, but it was from a frame of reference that they had a relationship with Jesus. All three of them did. Mary and Martha and Lazarus. And you can look at some of the stories that are recorded over in Matthew, one of in particular about Mary and Martha as Jesus is visiting there in their home and he's teaching, and Mary is sitting at his feet and Martha's busy about the cooking and so forth, and she complains about Mary not helping her, and Jesus says, well, Mary has chosen the better part. But they had a relationship with Jesus, and so then they send a message to Jesus, and Jesus being God, when you send a message to God, what's that called? It's called a prayer. Yeah. Now this prayer wasn't much of a prayer. It was 8 words. Jesus, he whom thou lovest is sick. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 words. Lord, behold, he whom you love is sick. You know, sometimes we wonder about our prayers. Do we need to be elegant or elaborate with our words? Do we need to pray a long time over a certain subject? Well, in this example, it was just 8 words. And yet it was sent out of a reference of a relationship with Jesus. You know, there are a lot of folks that go through their lives, and then when they get in a bind, they start praying and they expect God to answer their prayers when they've had very little, if any, relationship with Him. That's kind of tough to think through. Okay, that's one lesson that we need to learn, that we need to have a relationship with God if we're going to expect God to hear and answer our prayers. So what does a relationship look like? Well, it's like a relationship with anybody on earth that you have. If you love somebody, you want to spend time with them. You want to have conversation with them. You want to serve them. So Mary and Martha and Lazarus had that kind of relationship with Jesus. And then they send this prayer off to Him from that frame of reference. The second thing I want you to note is that when you're praying, sometimes things get worse before they get better. Here, Mary and Martha are expecting Jesus to do something before Lazarus dies. But he dies anyway. And there are people who have had ambitions, they've had dreams, they've had hopes, they've had children or family members that they've prayed over, and things have just gotten worse instead of better. Well, when that happens, sometimes we want to bury those hopes. You know, it's easier to think, well, they never were going to amount to anything, and there was nothing I could do about it, and so I have closed the book on that hope. And when Lazarus died, what did they do? They buried him. Their hope for Lazarus getting better was dashed. And so the first thing was that if we're going to have prayers to God and send our petitions to Him and expect Him to answer our prayers, it might be helpful to have a relationship with Him. The second thing is, do not let your faith fail when your prayers are not answered the way you want them to be answered, and it doesn't seem like God has heard and answered your prayer. When things get worse, before they get better, hang on. Don't give up hope. Jesus had a plan for Lazarus, and that plan included Lazarus having to go through the experience of death and then be called back to life. So a friend of Terry and I, Gerald Harris, has a 3-point message on Lazarus that he preaches. And I was looking at some records recently, or looking at his presence on the web, and it looks like he's still preaching this message from time to time. And the first point in his 3-point message is that Lazarus was a defeated Lazarus. The second point is that he then was a dead Lazarus. We'll get to the third point later. But Jesus hears that prayer. He gets the prayer, and then it appears that he shows up 4 days too late. When he gets there, Martha comes out to see him, and I just wonder if through the familiarity with Jesus, she was upset with him, and she says, Jesus, if you'd have been here, Lazarus wouldn't have died. Now, why was Jesus gone? Well, if you read the 10th chapter of John, you find that the Jewish leaders were trying to kill him. And they had tried to stone him, but he just disappeared out of their presence. And then he left and went to the other side of the Jordan River. So he's over there, and his disciples are with him, and he has stepped away because they were trying to stone him to death. That's not a part of his plan. He's not going to allow them to kill him that way, because the cross is his destiny. The cross is his goal. The cross is his plan. So he's going to be going to the cross. But when we studied Thomas, we heard Thomas say, when Jesus was over there and got that message from Lazarus, and Jesus says, let's go and see him. Okay, speaking of Lazarus. Not let's go and weep over his dead body, not let's go and console Mary and Martha, but let's go see him. Go see Lazarus, and see him they did. So the next thing that I want you to see here in this text is that when you say your prayer and God responds, he's never late. It might appear, and it appeared to Mary and Martha, that he was 4 days late, but he was not. He was still on time. So don't let our perception of timing lead us to believe that God has missed it. God hasn't heard our prayer. So on his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had been in the tomb for 4 days. So Mary and Martha had this issue of a dead body that they had to attend to. And so they buried it. And 4 days later, this is it's a sad state of the human body, but it does decay. And now it's beginning to stink. And when Jesus gets there, Martha comes to him, Lord, if you'd have been here, my brother would not have died. But then she says a remarkable thing that indicates that she still has some hope. Because she says in verse 22, but I know that even now, listen to that hope. Even now, God will give you whatever you ask. And Jesus confirms it. He says, your brother will rise again. Your brother will rise again. And Martha misunderstood, I think. She says, I know he'll rise again at the resurrection at the last day. But Jesus then says this beautiful line that we quote from time to time, where Jesus says to her, I am. It's one of his I am statements. You remember I am from the burning bush, where Moses was commissioned to go down into Egypt and pull the children of Israel out. And he says, well, when I go down there and they ask me, who is this God that has sent you? What name should I say is your name, God? And he says, tell them that I am has sent you. So Jesus then, being God, says, I am the resurrection and the life. So then Jesus asks a really good question. And I'll ask you the question. Do you believe this? That was his direct question to Martha. Martha had already said, I believe that whatever you ask God to do, he'll do. And I believe that he'll be resurrected at the end. And Jesus says, I am the resurrection and the life. Do you believe this? Well, she says, yes, Lord. I believe that you're the Messiah, the Son of God, who has come into the world. So then she goes back to tell Mary. And Mary then drops what she's doing and hastily moves quickly out to see Jesus. And when Mary got there, listen to what she says. She says, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. And I wonder the tone of what she says. You have to wonder if it was, Jesus, if you'd have been here, he wouldn't have died. Or, I know that you had to leave because they were trying to stone you. And if you'd have been here, he wouldn't have died. We don't know what the tone was. We just know what the words were. And Jesus saw all of the people, because the people from the house came with Mary, and saw everyone weeping, saw her weeping, and then he asked the question, where have you laid him? And in recovery jargon, that is, take me to your stinky stuff. And we all have stinky stuff. And Jesus is saying, I want to help you with that, but I need you to take me where your problem is. Now, did Jesus ask her to do that because he didn't know where Lazarus was? Jesus is God. He knows everything. So, no, it was that it was necessary for her to take Jesus to the problem. And so Jesus went with them and he wept with her. There's a thought about when Jesus wept that it could be that he knew he was about to call Lazarus back from heaven. And he was sad for Lazarus. Others say that it was Jesus was sad because Mary and Martha were sad. And all the people there were weeping. And he was sad because they didn't understand the hope that we have when somebody dies. They're in the presence of God. So Jesus says, take me to where your stinky stuff is. And Jesus does, or Mary does. And when they get there, Jesus says, okay, we now need to take the lid off of your stinky stuff. Let's take the stone off. Let's roll it away. You covered it up. You thought it was done and over with. You thought you buried your hope for your brother. You thought you buried the hope for whatever it was. Some of us have closed the book on hope for certain people. We've closed the book on our dreams of a certain future. Some of us have closed the book on a childhood wound, and we never want to revisit it. But Jesus is saying, I want you to take the covering off, roll the stone away, open it up, and let me deal with it. So he says, take the stone away, and Martha says, oh, maybe you don't know Jesus, but he's been dead 4 days and there'll be a terrible odor. You know, we do that sometimes, don't we? We think God doesn't know when he knows everything. So Jesus is standing there ready to cure the problem, and he said he's waiting on them to roll the stone away, so that, by the way, could he not have raised Lazarus from the dead with the stone still on it? Yes, he could have. The stone needed to be rolled away so that everybody there could see that Lazarus was raised from the dead. So they took away the stone, and Jesus looked up and prayed, and then when he had finished praying, he cries out with a loud voice, Lazarus, come forth. One country preacher I heard one time said that if he hadn't said Lazarus' name specifically, everybody in the cemetery would have gotten up and come out. So Lazarus, come out. And now think about this. He's bound up in grave clothes. So I wonder how he got out. Did he hop like that? Did he levitate out? Did Jesus bring him out? I don't know, but it just says that the dead man came out with his hands and his feet wrapped with the strips of linen, the cloth around his face. And yet here he's alive. He was dead, now he's alive. God has answered the prayers of Mary and Martha. And the sequence of events would lead you to believe that up until that moment, God had not heard their prayer. But he had. And it was a part of his plan to show them his power in his way. And that may be a lesson that we need to learn. We have our preconceived notion of how we want God to answer our prayers. But he may choose to do it a different way. And if he does, is that okay with you? Okay? So he came out. But he still had the trappings of the old dead life. He had been dead for 4 days, and the bodily fluids oozing through the cloths. It had to be awful. It had to be terrible. So Jesus wants to address that. And so he tells the people around Lazarus, this was the first Celebrate Recovery small group, loose him and let him go free. So they began pulling away the trappings of the dead, and they did release him. So Lazarus was defeated, debilitated. He was deteriorating, and then he was dead. So we had a defeated Lazarus and a dead Lazarus. Now that the resurrection of Lazarus has occurred, many believed because of that, believed in Jesus. And now Lazarus becomes a dangerous Lazarus, defeated, dead, and now he becomes a dangerous Lazarus. Don't you want to be that person that's dangerous to the king of darkness or the prince of darkness? John chapter 12, verse 10, because so many were following Jesus as a result of his raising Lazarus. John chapter 12, verse 10 says, that then the leading priest decided to kill Lazarus too. For it was because of him that many of the people had deserted them and believed in Jesus. That's who I want to be. I want to be a dangerous person to the Prince of Darkness and his kingdom. And then we can go and do what the people there did. Verse 17 of chapter 12 says, many in the crowd had seen Jesus call Lazarus from the tomb, raising him from the dead, and they were telling others about it. So why don't we go and tell others about Jesus? Let's pray. Father, thank you for this time together. Thank you for this story of Lazarus and the pain that he had to go through for the glory of Jesus. Now we are grateful that we can now attest to the fact that you are the resurrection and the life. Live that life out through us, and Lord, cause us to be broken bread and poured out wine for others. And as I read this week, someone once said, as long as there is one who doesn't know Jesus, we are indebted to that person to let them know. Help us, Lord, to tell others about Jesus. And we ask it in your name. Amen.